Welcome to Echoes Untold, where history whispers and we listen. Today, we unravel a story buried under decades of secrecy, a tale of courage, tragedy, and Cold War paranoia. The harrowing disaster of the Soviet nuclear submarine K-19, known infamously as the Widowmaker. This vessel became a symbol of both human ingenuity and the devastating consequences of technological failure under immense pressure. This wasn't just an accident, it was a catastrophe that nearly triggered nuclear war, a moment where brave sailors sacrificed their lives to prevent what could have been an apocalyptic explosion beneath the Arctic waves. Before we dive into this chilling event, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Echoes Untold, because history is full of voices waiting to be heard. In the early 1960s, at the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union was determined to match and surpass the United States in nuclear capability. The oceans had become a battlefield of silent killers, nuclear submarines armed with ballistic missiles that could deliver devastating blows without warning. At the center of this deadly arms race was K-19, the first Soviet nuclear submarine equipped with ballistic missiles. But its construction was rushed, plagued by engineering failures, and filled with design flaws that made it a ticking time bomb. The Soviet Union was desperate to deploy a nuclear submarine fleet as quickly as possible. Their goal was to catch up with the United States, which had already launched nuclear-powered subs like the USS Nautilus. The Kremlin placed immense pressure on the shipbuilders to complete K-19 under unrealistic deadlines. Essential safety features were ignored. Welding work was so rushed that engineers later found multiple weak points in the hull. Testing was incomplete, but political pressure forced the submarine to launch anyway. Even before its first official mission, K-19 was plagued with issues. During its sea trials, it suffered mechanical failures, and its crew had to repair multiple leaks and electrical problems, but none of these issues compared to the disaster that would strike on July 4, 1961. On that fateful day, K-19 was on patrol in the North Atlantic, deep under the icy waters. Suddenly, the worst possible scenario unfolded. The primary coolant system in one of its two nuclear reactors failed. This meant that the reactor, responsible for powering the submarine, had no way to regulate its rising temperature. Without cooling, a meltdown was imminent. If the reactor overheated to the point of explosion, it wouldn't just kill everyone on board. It could have released radioactive fallout into the ocean, detonated the submarine's nuclear missiles, creating an underwater nuclear blast, sparked an international incident between the US and the USSR, possibly igniting a full-scale war. The situation was desperate. There was no backup cooling system, another flaw caused by rushed construction. Captain Nikolai Zateyev had to act fast. With no other option, Captain Zateyev ordered a group of engineers to manually repair the reactor, a decision that would seal their fates. The men had no radiation suits, no protective gear, nothing but their determination to save the submarine and their comrades. They crawled into the reactor compartment, knowing full well that the radiation levels were already lethal. Within minutes, their bodies began to fail. They suffered dizziness, nausea, and intense pain. Their skin began to burn from the inside out due to acute radiation exposure. Some collapsed, while others continued working despite vomiting and losing vision. Despite the excruciating pain, they managed to jury-rig a temporary cooling system. They saved the submarine, but their lives were already lost. The men who worked on the reactor were carried out of the compartment barely alive. Over the next few hours and days, their bodies deteriorated at an unimaginable rate. Their skin blistered and peeled away, organs shut down one by one, bones literally dissolved due to radiation poisoning. Every single man who entered the compartment died a horrific death, but even those who weren't directly exposed suffered the consequences. Radiation had spread throughout the submarine, and many crew members developed sickness, cancer, and other long-term health issues. Instead of honoring the sacrifice of these brave sailors, the Soviet government did what it did best: cover up the disaster. Survivors were sworn to secrecy under threat of imprisonment or worse. The incident was erased from official records. Families of the deceased were given no real explanation for their loved ones' deaths. For decades, the world knew nothing about what happened aboard K-19. The Soviet Union couldn't afford to let such a disaster tarnish its image of military superiority. It wasn't until after the fall of the Soviet Union that the full truth about K-19 finally emerged. Survivors were finally able to speak openly, and historical records confirmed what had happened. The K-19 disaster exposed the recklessness of Cold War-era submarine programs, where politics often trumped safety. It forced future submarine designs to implement better emergency systems, but the lessons came too late for the men who had already paid the price. The submarine itself remained in service for decades before being decommissioned in 1991. But to this day, those who served aboard K-19 remember it by the name they gave it, Hiroshima. A name that serves as a chilling reminder of what could have been, had it not been for the sacrifice of a few brave men. This is just one of the many untold stories of history, stories of sacrifice, of heroism, and of the high cost of power. If you found this story compelling, help us keep history alive. Hit that like button, share this video, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Echoes Untold, where history whispers and we listen. Fact check note: the events of the K-19 disaster are based on declassified Soviet naval records, survivor testimonies, and extensive research, including Cold War submarines, the design and construction of US and Soviet submarines by Norman Polnar and Kenneth J. Moore, first-hand accounts from former crew members, including interviews and reports from Russian naval archives.